Hey kids, howdy, and welcome to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology, and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. It is September. We are in September. It is September 2nd. We're in a new moon, so new lunar cycle. I'm so grateful to put that last lunar cycle to bed. I'm a Leo sun and a Leo Venus, and there's just the Mercury retrograde went right over my sun and Venus. It hit me very directly. So the retrograde is over, the lunar cycle is over.
Nice.
We are in a new moon today, Monday, September 2nd, and we get to sort of, Alpha Omega start again. So we'll talk all about the healing Virgo moon in a few minutes. I first want to sort of do another shameless plug for my Going Deeper class that started this past weekend. I always keep registration open through the first day or two after the first class for people who might want to join and catch up by watching the recording. Go to michaellennox.com, check out classes. This is one of those shadow work classes where we use myths and fairy tales to do some specific shadow work. It's Hansel and Gretel and Demeter and Persephone. It's a juicy and rich class. Check that out. At michaellennox.com. And we have, as we always do, a question. This is from Marion, who writes, love you. I love reading these emails when people are kind to me. I'm so easy. I'm just Leo sun. Flatter me and hello, you'll get a cookie. Love you and enjoy learning so many things from you, Michael. I have a question. Smiley face emoji. If the nodes move counterclockwise, is 29 degrees considered the anaretic degree of that sign? Or how does that work? Does it even matter? My north node is at 29 degrees of Pisces. Thank you, Marion. She is from, I think, Canada. I love this question because it brings in a couple of complexities and sort of like I had to really lean into what I think about this question and certain rules that there are in astrology. So I want to start by saying this. I break rules all the time. In fact, there's like a name for me out in astrological circles. They would call me like a nouveau astrologer, somebody who's a little loosey-goosey with the rules of classical astrology. And astrology is thousands and thousands of years old. And there are traditions and rules that have been passed down, and certainly Western astrology, as we know it, is, the last 1,000 years or so, has been passed to us with all sorts of structures that we adhere to. And there's a whole mess of them that I don't give a shit about. There's so many techniques in astrology from the past that are based on superstitions. My favorite way of describing this is just the idea of benefic and malefic. Back in the superstitious days where they believed in like evil as a kind of concept that had to be reflected in astrology, malefic planets were marked. That's like Saturn and Mars. So Mars brings like bad malefic things, and Jupiter and Venus are the benefics. They bring the nice things. And it's like, that is not modern. That is not a world where we understand psychology and the unconscious. Like that was perfect for 500 years ago.
Right.
All right. So now, in the rules of astrology, patterns, grand trines, grand crosses, T-squares, all of the different shapes that planets can make up need to be held by planets, not points. The nodes are not a planet. They are a mathematical point. Now, it's a mathematical point based on actual physics of moving bodies. It's not like random. It's not arbitrary. It's math that guides these vectors of energy that we call the nodes of the moon. And yes, they appear to move backwards through the zodiac, so they don't have the same forward-moving concept that helps us understand the 30th anaretic degree perfectly. When I describe it, say we're talking about the sun. The sun moves through a sign. It's collecting data and wisdom from 0 degrees and 5 and then 23 and whatnot. It gets to the 30th degree. And the idea is it turns around to look at the mansion it's in. Have I mastered everything before I'm ready to move on? And so we call that 30th degree the anaretic degree. It has more oomph and power, and whatever planet is at that point will vibe with that sign's complete and total masterful consciousness. So when I describe that, it makes a lot of sense to people because of forward motion and the idea of evolution. And, like a Pisces contains all the wisdom from Aries on through Aquarius because it's the last sign. Everybody gets that because it makes sense. If the nodes move backwards, then, can we call that anaretic because it's not moving through the sign, collecting the data? And my first answer to this is absolutely yes. Because the point is what contains the wisdom, not the direction. The direction is just a function of time moving through us and getting from one infinite now moment, having it change to another infinite now moment, and we carry our wisdom with us. So that the point of 29 degrees of any sign would be masterful because of the consciousness of that point in the circle, whether you approach it from the front or the back. So for my money, and if I'm reading a client, I absolutely would read a 30th degree north node as anaretic, and I might speak into that. Now, in some domains of astrology, and again, I don't know some of these rules about the south node, north node, and, whether they can make shapes, because when I learned whatever I learned about that, it was, 20 years ago, and I haven't asked this question since. The north node is often considered a bona fide point in a pattern in a chart. Like I have a grand cross in my chart that includes my north node and my south node. And my astrologer teacher, Stephanie Azaria, 25 years ago, looked at my chart and said, well, I'm going to call this a cardinal grand cross, even though one of the points is the south node. So right there, that gave me permission to make a decision based on an instinct that I might have. If I go to SolarFire, my program, and look at a report for a chart, it will show patterns made with the north node as a component, but never the south node. So whatever classical rules governs the people who made up SolarFire, which is, like, for my money, the most comprehensive program out there for astrology, that program says the north node makes a point and the south node doesn't. Either way, to just get back to the question at hand and answer it, I treat the north node at the anaretic degree just as powerfully as an anaretic experience as I would a planet at the 30th degree. And while I haven't made this distinction of not talking about the south node in that way, when I'm talking to a person in a session and we're describing their nodal path, we're more interested in their north node because it's where their dharma is supposed to take them in life. So we'll focus on that more than the south. But yes, Marion, you can consider your north node an anaretic degree as far as I'm concerned.
Is it like a nice light week then if we're out of the Mercury retrograde?
Well, we have a new moon. We have a planetary ingress, which is always a little bumpy, Mars changing signs. And we have a whole bunch of Mercury retrograde wrap-ups from his retrograde cycle. So I'd say medium. It's a medium week. And I will also say this. Speaking of the anaretic degree, and I don't plan these things out. Like, I didn't consciously pick that question knowing about, this topic as the first segment of the podcast today. But Pluto has moved back into Capricorn today. So Pluto is right now at the 30th anaretic degree of Capricorn. So I'm going to talk a lot about the power of that. Back in May, Pluto at like 2 degrees of Aquarius went retrograde. So he's been retrograding since the spring. Today he moves back into Capricorn, where he will keep moving backwards until October 11th. He will then turn around, go direct at 29 degrees, 38 minutes of Capricorn in that second week in October. And then he will move into Aquarius from his direct motion. And by November 19th, he's in Aquarius for good for the next 20 years. And the powerful way that Pluto is transforming the planet, helping usher us into the age of Aquarius, sort of begins in earnest. And this year and last year featured Pluto zigzagging back and forth between these two signs, bringing change and transformation to world structures, Capricorn, and technology and the Aquarian sort of new world order where all humans are cared for, Aquarius. Right, so that's why last year and this year are so sort of crazily destructive all over the planet, where structures are being challenged in war and in enmity. And here on the planet, here in the United States, I think it's hysterical that Pluto's going to be in Capricorn during election season. That's outrageous. If you remember, kids, we're just coming out of the Pluto return of the chart of the United States of America. And that Pluto return, when Pluto was at 27 Capricorn a few years ago, marked the kind of disrobing of America. We're now naked in front of ourselves, really grappling with the divide that has run this country since before it was founded. And so we're in a contentious election season, and Pluto is back in the sign where he can help dismantle old structures. So God help us as we move through election season. I trust the human race and our resilience to make it, but understand it is beautifully ironic that Pluto has done this in this timing. If you have any planets or points at the very end at an anaretic degree, as long as it's greater than 29, 38 minutes, you'll be touched by Pluto over these couple of months while he's back there. And I don't love to talk about politics and the world stage too much on this. Well, anywhere. That's not how I use astrology. It's a great symbol of using the United States political landscape and the connection to Pluto's dipping back into Capricorn, because in the mirror consciousness, all of that conflict out there is also happening on the inside of every single one of us who are perceiving it. To the extent that we each are, we're all divided and we're all at war with ourselves. All of us are. That's a human condition. And our job, I think, as good human beings is to grab the things on the dark side of that fight, pull them out of the shadow, look at them, try to love them and not hate them about ourselves, and then become more integrated human beings as a result. That's how, that's how I live my life and it's how I teach others to live theirs. But make no mistake about it. The world out there is either a reflection of the consciousness of everybody's beholding it, or it's not, and that's just bullshit. I believe that it is, and so you can think of the next couple of months as a revisit to the structures that you've built inside your psyche that might need to be dismantled before you're actually able to meet the Aquarian ideal of serving the community at a more powerful level, because you are walking a more elevated path in your individual walk. So once again, those dates are now through October 11th, Pluto retrograding in Capricorn, goes direct on that date, October 11th, and on November 19th is the day that we have Pluto entering Aquarius for the next couple of decades. Have at it. It's also the new moon in Virgo today, Monday, September 2nd. It hits exact at 6:56 p.m. Pacific time, so it's building all day. If you're listening to this podcast when it comes out Sunday night or Monday during the day, you're in the dark of the moon, already sort of in the fertile soil of intention-setting consciousness. The new moon exact degree point is 11 degrees, which means we've got 2 more days of Virgo moon to carry this new moon sort of energy with us for a couple of days. And I love the Virgo new moon. Virgo is all about healing and process and integration, putting things together. I sometimes call this the Humpty Dumpty lunar cycle, right? Because all the kings, men and women put, the eggshell back together. I talk a lot about Virgo and the body, and I want to make sure that this distinction is clear. Virgo didn't invent the body, even though I say that it did. When I talk about the arc of the zodiacal order, Aries gets here, Taurus says we're informed, Gemini lets us talk, Cancer has us, protect ourselves, Leo says express yourself, and Virgo says a body will do all those things. That's why I always talk about Virgo and the body. But that we have a body is an Aries consciousness. That's why Mars, as a planet, rules and reflects things that are happening with the physical body. So in a new moon in Virgo, we're not setting intentions about the body itself. We're setting intentions about the health of the body, how we treat the body, what we give the body on a regular basis in order to have optimal health. Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, so it's about precision and details and organization, right? So we've just had the expansiveness of the Leo mansion where we dance around and find our joy. It's the height of summer in the northern hemisphere, so we get to play in the sign that's ruled by the sun. And Virgo consciousness says, all right, now we start preparing for winter. We collect our nuts and we bury them so that we can chew on them in the paucity of winter. So that's another sort of organizational perspective of this lunar cycle.
I've never thought about Virgo season or the sign in that way in terms of like seasonally, at least how it happens for us in the northern hemisphere,
And the signs are in order for a reason. We can make
Right.
a story out of the order, and that's, which is sort of why it's always funny to talk about the southern hemisphere, which is just a colonized place on the planet that shouldn't have an astrology that moves in that direction. They should have an astrology that moves in the next direction. But we love our folks down under, and even if I can't provide you with the time zone shifts that you need to use my material to guide you, I always get asked, and I always answer that question. You probably need to ask somebody who lives where you live.
Yeah.
How they do it, because I don't know. At any rate, this is a serious new moon in that it's opposing Saturn, meaning we got to get down to business. If Saturn is holding an opposition with the new moon, then our wisdom has to count, right? We really want to dig into all that we've learned over the last couple of lunar cycles and especially those 2 full moons in a row in Capricorn really rocked us a little bit. And and so any lunation that involves Saturn so directly, I guess the language there would be, the teacher means business. This is not like a new moon to sit out in terms of discerning what you want to focus on in the details of your life, because Saturn's over there going, slow down, take this seriously. This is an important moment. Now, we are also preparing for wild amounts of change on the planet, especially next year when Pluto moves into Aquarius fully. Uranus, shortly thereafter, is going to move into Gemini for 8 years or so. And they're going to trine each other next year and in 26. That's slow change and fast change in a trine. That means the next 2 years are going to bring about a lot of deep, abiding Plutonian changes and revolutionary Uranian sudden shifts from the air signs of Uranus, of Aquarius and Gemini. So it's interesting to me that in a healing-focused new moon, where I might give the message, hey kids, shit's about to hit the fan, you need to be marshaled up and ready in a healed and integrated place to meet what life is about to bring us. And that could be part of your intention in a Virgo full moon, is like, help me marshal up my internal landscape so that I am integrated in all of the ways that I might feel disconnected, so that I might step up to a higher level of my personal functioning so I can help and participate in a world that needs us all to be participating, at our mastery level. Virgo is a sign of mastery. It's Yoda's new moon. Chiron the healer and Chiron the teacher of the wisdom is in the house in a Virgo new moon. But Pluto and Uranus are trining each other in this full moon because Pluto moves into Capricorn before the new moon hits. So Pluto at the anaretic master degree of Capricorn, ready to tear down big structures, is meeting up with the fast and sudden revolutionary change planet Uranus at 27 degrees of Taurus. And so not only this new moon has this thrust of slow, fast change in it, the whole lunar cycle ahead takes everything that's imprinted in the map that I'm looking at right now, reading for you guys, and says, this is what the next 28 and a quarter days are going to feel like. And so Earth sign changes, meaning changes in our bodies, changes in structures, changes in things that we thought of as fixed and solid, will be part of this lunar cycle. And while this is not an eclipse, the full moon of this lunar cycle is our first eclipse. So we are, in fact, moving through two rock'em sock'em crazy lunar cycles, and this is one of them. So expect a lot of change in the next 4 weeks. Set deep intentions that allow you to consider the past and all of the prep you've done to live a masterful life. Thank you, Saturn. And I'm going to finish with what Mars is doing in this new moon, because I think it's telling that he's hitting a lot of planets in a challenged way during the lunation. And then later this week, he moves into Cancer, a sign that he's not happy in. And so Mars's movement will be carrying the consciousness of this new moon with him as he goes into the inhibited and internally focused sign of Cancer. But during the lunation at essentially he's 28 degrees, 56 minutes of Gemini when the new moon is exact, which means he's essentially also at the anaretic degree of Gemini. So from that place, so Mars, body, embodiment, choices, goals, ambitions, anger, sex, all of the physical elements of who we are, is squaring Neptune and inconjuncting Pluto. So Mars in a square to Neptune says, we're going somewhere, but we don't know where. Neptune's shadow is always the fog bank, the cloudiness, the confusion that comes when spirit's in the room but not operating directly. And squares are the most abrasive geometry we work with in astrology. And so, again, the new moon says we're moving in the direction of, what's next? And Mars is saying, but I don't know what's next. I don't know what's next. So you got to respect that. Like, if you have that feeling,
have patience.
Right, exactly right. It's like so often in sessions, people will come in with a sensation of, I don't know what's happening and I don't know where I'm going. And they're judging themselves so profoundly. Then meanwhile, Mars will be squaring their Neptune or something, that's actually longer term transits with Neptune that are the problem with this. And it's amazing to watch someone let themselves off the hook when they realize you're just in a state that's designed to not know, and we're not well trained to not know. We don't know more than we know, right? So we really ought to be better at flailing around in the unknown territory, but we covet and crave clarity so much, we'll make it up. So you won't necessarily know where you're going, and it doesn't matter because Neptune rules the unconscious. The unconscious knows where you're going. Just remember that as you set intentions. And then this juicy energy of Mars hitting Pluto in the 150-degree inconjunct, the track change angle that I like to call the Great Eliminator. As we set intentions for deeper healing, integration, and focus on purpose, Mars is saying you gotta let go of old ways you structured your life. Right? So if Mars and Neptune are saying, I don't know what to do, that's because old ideas and old structures probably won't serve you. So Mars in conjunct Pluto says, all right, that project, that goal, that ambition, that sex partner, that way of being doesn't serve. It's time to let it go. I don't know where I'm going next, but I'm going to dial in to set powerful intentions, trust my soul to be taking me on a journey, focus on the healing process and integration, let the unconscious do the rest. Have at it. Let's just pull out Mars for a second and talk about it specifically. I mentioned it in the last segment, but as I said, he's participating in the way that he is, kind of aggressively and with great purpose. And then on Wednesday of this week, he changes signs. He moves into Cancer. Mars is not happy in Cancer. In fact, here's one of those old astrology rules. Mars doesn't like it in Cancer. It's known as his fall. You know, when a planet is in its fall, it means it's not doing well, and it's because it's the opposite sign of what's called its exaltation. So Capricorn is where Mars is exalted, so Cancer is where he's in fall. Now, here's the deal with the fucking astrology rules. Exaltation comes out of Babylon, and there's no, record about why. Why is Mars exalted in Capricorn? There's not a rule about that other than Mars is. And then Mars is in fall in its opposite sign from its exaltation, Cancer. So it's they don't say why, just that it is. But here's the thing. It makes complete sense archetypally. Mars in Capricorn is at perfectly home because Capricorn's a sign that wants a goal and an ambition to be trekked with up the mountain till it's complete. Mars loves that. Cancer is watery and inhibited and contained. Mars hates that. He wants to burst out with his fiery old way. And Cancer is the most sort of engulfing water sign because it's personal water. It's the first water sign. He's exploding with fire in a mansion where he feels like he can't act, choose, and do without constraint. So for the 6 weeks or so that follows to October something, about 6 weeks is how long Mars spends in a sign till he goes retrograde, which he'll do at the end of this year. And so just know that for those 6 weeks, how we make decisions and choose will be a little constrained. The value of this placement is Cancer allows us to get in touch with our feelings. Though the knee-jerk reaction to the archetype's connection to our feelings is it says, close the door, get the throw, pull the bonbons out of the freezer and watch some Netflix. And Mars wants action, right? But forewarned is forearmed. Know that for 6 weeks, starting on Wednesday, how we do all of those Martian things will have a kind of constraining emotional timbre to it. Just know that and do with it what you will. It's a very big week in the Mercury retrograde wrap-up. Woo. Yay. Yes. Thank God this lunar cycle didn't have any of that bleed over. I'm very grateful that Mercury went direct before we entered the next lunar cycle, especially since this lunar cycle is ruled by Mercury and Chiron. And, in fact, the first transit that Mercury is making is part of the new moon. So I'm mentioning it now because I want you to look back a little bit about this rather than having buried that in my talk about the new moon. Understand that Mercury and Chiron in a trine means that we're operating free and clear of wound consciousness that we've recently been working through. Mercury is about perception, right? So how we perceive our wounds is the extent to which we feel them as painful. In fact, that's Chiron's majesty. It's not that he takes wounds away. He teaches us to transmute how we perceive the wounded space so it's no longer perceived as a wound, but rather something that has been loved into healing and is now taken its proper place in that idea of integration that Virgo represents. So with Chiron and Mercury in a trine today, we're in a good place with this. And the Mercury retrograde cycle might have brought us through some healing narratives. So the 3 dates for this transit are July 18th as the first date it hit, August 23rd when it hit during the backward motion, and today, September 2nd. Give or take a day or two with each of them. And you'll see with the other 2 transits that I mentioned, the dates are very close. But these are the specific dates for the Mercury Chiron trine. Then on Friday, we move through a disruptive, knock you on your butt from the neck up square between Mercury and Uranus. This might have brought sudden awarenesses of things that needed your attention back on July 21st, with a second visit while backwards, so therefore bumpier, on August 18th, and then hitting for the third and final time this Friday. So as we move towards the weekend, there might be some shocking conversations or thought forms or ideas that rise up. And if you glance back at those dates, you might see a connection of something that you've figured out. Then on Sunday, something really interesting happens. There's the third hit of Mercury in Leo in conjuncting Neptune, the great eliminator angle with the planet of great spirit. So this is what I call the more will be revealed transit. I always talk about the shadow that Neptune brings is fogs. I always talk about the shadow that Neptune brings, like a bank of fog rolling in, obscuring clear vision. Well, just as a fog can roll in, a transit involving Neptune with the right geometry can signal the fog lifting. So that's why I call this great eliminator angle between the precision of our perceptions and the cloudiness of Neptune and the great eliminator angles. That's why I call this the more will be revealed. So the dates for this were July 25th. The backward motion moment was August 15th. And then Sunday, the 8th, is the third and final, more will be revealed. So you glance back to those dates, and if there was something that either confused you or revealed something, there might be a connection to what the weekend brings. In a general way, you can certainly look back to July 18th through the 25th as one block of how was your communication that week in July? What were you thinking about? What were you negotiating? How is it going? Then you look to August, and between the 15th and the 23rd, that sort of middle of the month, is when all of those transits hit again. And now this week, Wednesday through Sunday, is the wrap-up. So if the nitpicky looking at each transit by itself isn't yielding you anything, you can look back in a general way, that's sort of third week in July, third-ish week in August, and this week as a kind of potentially connected dynamic. And if you don't see anything easily, let it go. Don't rack your brain trying to figure this out, especially in a Virgo lunar cycle where the mind will get mired with all of the details. Just know that we're wrapping things up with Mercury. Mercury moving into Virgo is good for us, because he's in his home turf. So thinking and negotiating and conversations and thought process and perceptions will be more precise and clear and masterful next week when Mercury is now in Virgo for a couple of weeks. And he's starting his free and clear portion next week as well. So we're in the wrap up, but then we sort of start up next week with not only the Mercury retrograde completely in our rearview mirror, but the idea that for 2 months we don't have a retrograde in sight. And I'll talk all about that in next week's episode. Meanwhile, this week gonna be kind of fun, a little bumpy. Have at it.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. This week we have an email in dream, and Severio is writing in from Australia. He says, "Dear Dr. Michael, I hope this email message finds you well. I've been an avid listener and Instagram follower of your work for over 3 years, and I wanted to express my deep gratitude for the joy and knowledge you bring to your listeners."
Oh, yay. Thank you. I have to also say, it's just fascinating that on a podcast episode where I mention Australia and Down Under, and people following me and be like, well, I don't know how you do it. And now we have someone who's following me for years on Instagram from Australia. Thank you, Severios. I love it.
Okay, recently, my girlfriend had a dream that has left us both intrigued. In her dream, she encountered a big, fat-faced, black snake that appeared frustrated and anxious around us. We found ourselves standing at a wooden door in a natural setting with trees overhead. In the dream, I took on the role of protector, using a stick to fend off the snake and ensure our safety. Despite the snake's increasing frustration, I remained calm and unfazed by its presence. This made the snake more frustrated he couldn't get to me. I'm reaching out to you in the hope that you could provide some clarity or insights into the symbolism behind this dream. We'd both greatly appreciate it. Thank you for your time and the opportunity. Warmest regards, Severio. So it's quite short.
Well, snake dreams are always going to, at some level, be about some element of change and transformation. Right? Everywhere you see snake as a symbol, that's what it represents. From the idea that we all learn that snakes shed their skin, like every third grader in the world in civilized countries learns about snakes shedding their skins. So that fact sort of, all animal medicine is based on animal behavior, right? That's how, you don't get vantage point from a possum. You get that from a hawk because the hawk flies and sees and the possum plays dead and has that medicine. So snakes, because they shed their skins and have a perfectly formed new skin ready to meet the world upon changing, they represent that kind of transformation. If you see the snakes on the physician's caduceus, that's another sort of idea of change and transformation that in the world of healing and health, the snake represents the transformation into a healed state. The idea that some snakes are venomous and can cause death can also incorporate an idea of change and transformation coming from snake behaviors, although not all snakes are poisonous or venomous or deadly. Even the New Testament, the snake is what creates the change that occurs. The snake initiates the curiosity that leads to the expelling from the garden. So the change and transformation happens because the snake is there. Mm-hmm. So any dream about a snake has got to be about change and transformation. In this case, it's the girlfriend's dream, and Severios is kind of presenting it to us. And I have to keep remembering that as I sort of hold the dream in mind, because it's about her perspective of change. And in her anxiety and frustration, it's her boyfriend, Severios, who is sort of being called on to use his stick, if you'll pardon the phallic.
Oh my God.
Sort of ideas of snakes and phalluses and sticks. Because there's that. I mean, if I were Freud, we'd be having a blast with this dream from the sexual implications of man and boyfriend with stick and snake and anxiety and frustration. And I'm not going to retract that as ridiculous. Like there might be sexual anxiety and frustration that's being sort of played out in this dream with the snake and the phallus and the stick of the boyfriend. That's not where I go. That's not what the dream speaks to me. But if that speaks to you guys, take that into mind. I think this is about shadow work and change. First of all, the snake is black. So that to me says we're in shadow, we're in the capacity of change and transformation as powerful and strong, black snake. And is it fat-faced?
Yeah, the face is fat.
I love that. I don't know what to make of that exactly, but it's a thing because he included it. Right? It's like the dream is sacred. It happened inside the mind and the soul of the girlfriend, but how it's handled by them in conversation and then shared with me by him counts.
Right.
So the face is about, how we express out in the world. We reveal often what we're feeling inside through our faces. So the fat-faced black snake speaks to me something about what we're willing to express to the world. The snake, if we say the snake is representing the change, is frustrated and anxious. That must mean that whatever change is happening in Severius's girlfriend's life is making her frustrated and anxious. So this idea, now let's get into the girlfriend idea, that it's not Severius's dream, it's her dream. So that's not him in her dream. It's the part of her that vibes with the masculine principle as it lives in her. Her ability to protect herself and marshal her life as represented by him, but it's not his dream, it's her dream. So the masculine principle is understanding that in the face of frustration and anxiety, direction you want it to go. And calmness in the face of change can also be frustrating and anxious, producing, because we might want to move fast or impulsively. And this dream is sort of suggesting that even though it's a little scarier to move slowly and more calmly in the face of great change, I think this dream is suggesting that. And I think the dream is reflecting something organic as a pattern inside the girlfriend, because the dream takes place in a natural setting. And so when there's an absence of civilization in a dream, it's not a city or a town, I think that the dream is reflecting something more deeply personal to the dreamer. The trees in the setting says we're in the girlfriend's psyche and soul, not her neighborhood. But there's a door. Doors imply decisions to be made. Do I go through this door? Do I lock the door? Do I shut it? Is it open? What do I do? The door's presence means there's some choice that's being presented to the girlfriend, and there's anxiety and frustration about the changes and a sense of, okay, the way to proceed is calmly but strongly. I got my stick. I know what I want not to happen, and I'm going to stay calm as I steward this change to happen in a way that I can manage, even if doing so might make me frustrated and anxious.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the Daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.